There has been another horrific incident at a garment factory in Bangladesh. An 8-story building collapsed today, killing at least 145 people.
Dhaka, Bangladesh, the 9th largest and 7th most densely populated city, with 23 million people living in it. On April 24, 2013, as dawn broke, thousands set off to work at the Rana Plaza, unaware it would be their final farewell to their loved ones. The world watched in horror as headlines flashed across screens. Building collapsed in Dhaka, killing thousands and injuring many others. And beneath the rubble of tragedy, a deeper truth emerged. Someone was to blame. The heartbreak was, it was not just an accident, but a consequence of negligence. Join us as we unravel the story behind one of the darkest days in recent history. The day before the incident, cracks had appeared on the lower floors of the building, causing panic within the workers, yet they were assured all was secure. Despite the evident cracks, workers were instructed to continue their tasks. Little did they know, danger was lurking. What appeared to be just another day in the heart of Bangladesh was on the brink of turning into a global tragedy. As dusk approached, it marked the beginning of a dark chapter, with 1,134 souls lost and 2,500 left injured. But who was responsible for the death of these innocent people? Who was responsible for the pain that thousands of families suffered through? Let's unveil the reality behind the Rana Plaza building disaster that took 1,134 lives. In Bangladesh, the apparel industry stands as a pillar of the nation's economy as it represents a staggering 80% of Bangladesh's export revenue, leading many to find employment in the garment sector. Countless individuals, predominantly young women and girls, find employment in these garment factories. While the work is challenging and the compensation minimal, it's vital for numerous households. Nestled in Dhaka, the nation's capital, stood Rana Plaza, originally a modest 4-story building constructed on a pond. Its owner, Sohail Rana, leveraged his political ties to illegally add more levels. By 2013, it had risen to an imposing 9 stories. The ground levels housed retail shops and a bank, while the upper levels churned out garments for renowned global brands. Yet, unbeknownst to many, this prolific production site was on the brink of a catastrophe that would send shockwaves through the global community. During a visit by a TV crew to the ground floor shops, noticeable cracks in the walls were spotted just a day before the tragedy. These observations caused concern, leading many on the lower floors to evacuate. However, the factory workers on the upper levels were told the cracks were minor and everything was safe. Despite their reservations, especially since some had felt the building shake due to machines on the top floor, they felt compelled to return to work. The fear of losing their jobs, essential for supporting their families, loomed large. The responsibility to ensure everyone's safety lay with the building's owner. But was this owner truly concerned about the well-being of the workers? The events that followed suggested otherwise. In the early morning, the building faced a power outage. This meant the generators on the top floor had to be turned on. As they started up, the building trembled, a sensation workers had felt before, but this time, alarming sounds and vibrations quickly followed. Panic ensued as workers tried to escape, but time wasn't on their side. Rana Plaza, with its 9 stories, came crashing down, bringing down a neighboring building along. As the dust settled in the aftermath of the Rana Plaza disaster, a relentless army of rescuers arrived to help. Day and night they kept digging, seeking signs of life in the ruins. For 5 days, rescuers worked tirelessly, pulling out hundreds of survivors. Remarkably, 17 days post-collapse, Reshma Begum was discovered alive on May 10, 2013. She was on the 3rd floor, the very place she had been working when the tragedy struck. Rescuers found Reshma in a small space near a prayer room where she had been breathing through a tiny pipe. Reshma's survival was a glimmer of hope during a deeply tragic period. With over 1,000 lives lost to the disaster, her rescue uplifted the spirits of the Bangladeshi people. By the time she was found, hopes of finding survivors were nearly faded. As the days turned into fortnight, hope began to wane. The search for the departed souls ended on May 13, 2013, leaving behind a chilling tally of 1,134 lives lost and 2,500 wounded. One of the survivors, who was unable to work after 10 years, stated that the accident was like a nightmare that she could never wake up from. It was a record carved into history, marking the deadliest accidental structural failure in modern times. Sorrow took over the hearts of families who gathered around the shattered remains. They were holding the photographs of their cherished ones, giving a reminder of the loss. The disaster that took the lives of 1,134 people and left over 2,500 injured started to present a question for the government. Why did this happen? Could someone be held responsible for this tragedy? The government was under pressure, and finally, an investigation was underway. The investigation uncovered numerous issues and identified several responsible parties. For starters, the building's foundation was flawed. It was constructed over an area that used to be a pond, compromising its stability. Adding extra floors to the building without getting permission made things even worse. Because of his political ties, the owner was able to add more floors without the necessary approvals. Using his influence and wealth, he jeopardized the safety of many, resulting in a tragedy that impacted a countless number of families. Operating heavy machinery also added to the facts, even though it wasn't built to handle such loads. Rana Plaza, with its fragile structure, wasn't suited to hold such weight, yet the owner faced no inquiries. Those in authority turned a blind eye. It's as if the safety of the workers was an afterthought. Their primary concern? Profits. And the tragic result, the loss of approximately 1,200 lives. The debate over whether the Rana Plaza disaster was murder or a dreadful twist of fate remains a question. Legally, it may not qualify as murder, but ethically and morally, the burden of guilt is heavy and distributed among various people, especially the owner. The factory owner, Sohail Rana, played a crucial role in this tragedy. He knowingly put his workers at risk by forcing them to work in a structurally weak building. This reckless disregard for the safety of his employees demands accountability. In the eyes of many, he was the real culprit. However, the blame doesn't rest solely on Sohail Rana. Regulatory agencies and government officials also share the responsibility. They fail to enforce safety standards and often turned a blind eye to corruption within the industry. This negligence allowed unsafe working conditions to persist and ultimately led to the disaster. These individuals and organizations were also held accountable for their inaction. International fashion brands that sourced products from Rana Plaza factories could not escape scrutiny either. Their greed for low-cost production contributed to the exploitative conditions and lax safety measures in these factories. In their pursuit of greater earnings, they indirectly contributed to the disaster by overlooking the safety and well-being of the workers producing their goods. Due to these shortcomings, the world witnessed a disaster unlike any before in history. Numerous investigations showed that low wages, harsh working conditions, and immense pressure to produce clothes rapidly took a toll on the workers' mental and physical well-being. Sohail Rana, the building's owner, was arrested 4 days after the collapse and was kept in custody due to several allegations. He is accused of causing the deaths and has been charged with murder. In a separate instance back in 2017, he was found guilty of corruption and given a 3-year imprisonment by a special court in Dhaka who determined he had dishonestly acquired property and money. He is still in custody as part of a long-running trial. He faces multiple charges, including murder and the trial for violating building codes of conduct. Years later, the spot where Rana Plaza once stood remains vacant, marked only by a memorial from the Workers' Party of Bangladesh. It stands as a somber testament to the steep price of affordable fashion. The scars of that tragic day continue to weigh heavily on the community.